Here, where the Academic Standards Committee sort of comes together with the Superintendent's Parent Advisory Group. So thank you all for coming. It's particularly sweet for me because I was a member of the Superintendent's Parent Advisory for 10 years while my children were in school. So it's like coming back, and this has always been a great meeting. What makes it special is you set our agenda. We'll be dividing into 2 rooms. The secondary meeting will be in here. Across the hall will be elementary. And basically, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions of the professional staff that's here about what's on your mind. And so, and it's great for us board members to hear what are the hot topics in your schools right now. So I just want to officially welcome everyone. For those of you who may have either represented 2 schools or have children in 2 schools, you don't have to worry as much this year, wondering what's going on across the hall. Because our meetings are being recorded. And so no video, just audio in each room, and they'll be available on the YouTube channel. So if you had such a great time in this room, and wonder what happened, you can go home and listen to what happened across the hall. So thank you very much for coming, and now I will hand it off to Dr. Christensen.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ms. Brooks, and good evening, everyone. Thank you as well on behalf of the administration of the school district and our faculty of the school district for being here. We have a number of board members here this evening, as is always the case for any board committee meeting. And this is really neat. I've never been part of a school district where this happens, this sort of convergence like this. And so I'm anxious to see. And I'm anxious to hear from our professionals because I am still very much learning about our programs and how we do things. So tonight, I'm going to hop back and forth. So I'll go on that YouTube channel in the coming days and listen to it, but I'm also going to hop back and forth. And if any of you want to hop back and forth, we'll have secondary in here, middle schools and high schools, and elementary across the hallway in classroom 2. If any of you want to hop back and forth, then you'll have a chance to do that as well. So Mr. Desko, if you give a nice wave over there, Barry Desko, Director of Secondary Education. He will stay in this room and moderate this room. Mr. McClay, Joe McClay, Director of Elementary Education, will likewise moderate the room across the hallway. So with that, we will be ready to begin. And so if you want to anchor yourself, at least at the beginning, K to 6 elementary, you can gather your things and make your way across the hallway, follow Mr. McClay and company. And we will plan on spending about an hour in this setting. Yes. That's my story. Let's do this. There you go. Me too. I was intimidated. I was just walking around.
Well, good evening, everybody. I just want to let you know that the closest mic that we have for you is here. They're pretty powerful, but if you do ask a question, it'd be great if you would speak loudly enough. So hopefully through the YouTube channel that your question will be recorded so that the answer will make sense. And I'll kind of keep an eye on it over here just to make sure that the sounds are being picked up. Maybe the best thing to start with is some introductions to let you know who's on the panel. I'll ask them to tell you their name, position, the schools that they're at, and then we'll get started. Mr. Funk, I'll start.
Okay. Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming out. My name is Al Funk, and I am the principal of Council Rock South.
I'm Brian Ludwig. I'm CARES Coordinator in the Counseling Department at Holland and Richboro Middle Schools.
I'm Renee Devlin. I'm the Science Coordinator, kindergarten to 12th grade. I teach at North. I also have 3 children in the district. Sorry, senior and 2 sophomores.
Hi, I'm Abby Rogers. I'm a counselor at North.
Andrea Houston-Lingman. I teach at North, and I'm the Secondary English Language Arts Coordinator.
Hello, I'm Susan McCarthy, and I'm principal of Council Rock High School North.
I'm Tom Williams. I'm a counselor at Council Rock South.
And I'm Rich Hollahan, the principal at Richboro Middle School.
So thank you to our panel for coming out tonight. The toughest part of this evening is getting the first question asked. And then once somebody breaks the ice, that we have a tendency that people are willing to ask some other questions. So we just open it up, ask you to, if you want to direct it to a particular person, please do so. If not, I'll just kind of moderate and make sure that we get enough people that can answer the question that makes the most sense for them to weigh in on. Anybody like to start? There we go.
This will probably be
Great,
easy.
thank you.
Any chance of having accelerated English 9?
That's a great question.
And I know it's been asked in the past.
It's been asked, and actually it's been discussed heavily for the last 2 to 3 years, I'd say, at the various schools. I think what the strengths of that being a possibility would be that we would be able to curtail some of our work for the specific level, the more differentiated work for the students in the particular level. But the flip side of that for the 9th grade teachers, quite frankly, has been that they've looked at the incoming freshmen as it being a transitional year, and it's very, very challenging as it is. So they're hesitant to think of having an additional challenge go on those students who are clearly, they don't want to jump into the honors pool right now. So given that you're transition in 9th grade, and then absolutely if they're ready for accelerated, we have it in 10th. And so as of right now, that's what they feel would be best for the kids, the way that the grades are configured.
And just on a practical side, different than the academic portion of it is we struggle when we continue to differentiate the courses because it continues to spread the students out more and it becomes more of a scheduling difficulty for our counselors and administrators. So the more courses that you offer within a particular curricular area, you lose that opportunity to take a large group of kids and divvy it up over 10 sections. Now you're taking smaller numbers of kids over smaller sections, and class size sometimes becomes a difficult component, as well as where you place those sections so they don't create scheduling conflicts for students. So all those things go into the conversation when we're looking to possibly add courses. I don't know if you want to even speak to that, just to give people a sense, Abby, about what that looks like, or Tom, the scheduling piece of it, so people get a sense when you add additional sections or courses, what that does to students. You guys live it and you're living it right now. You're in the middle of it.
Right.
Just makes it sometimes challenging when we're scheduling electives because we try to give kids the option to take electives that they like. So the more choices, obviously the priority would go to the core courses, English, math, science, social studies. So the less options we have with our core courses, it makes electives a little harder to schedule as well.
Well, I can say too, I taught about 10 years at both the 7th and 8th grade level as well as the high school level, so I can see the perspective of both sides, seeing how as an 8th grade teacher I would want to recommend something more challenging for students. So I would say if there's anybody who wishes there were a 9 accelerated, make sure that when you go into 9th grade that the teacher knows that you're looking for more challenge. And if that's the case, then we'll keep that in mind for the 10th grade accelerated versus honors recommendations as well.
Thanks. Yeah.
I have a question, but I thought I'd be like, this is a little bit more specific, and I'm kind of way down on the list of priorities. But the question is this: at the high school level, when you are looking at social studies, and sorry if this sounds familiar, but I'm just trying to understand, there are certain levels and certain times when you take certain courses. Like you would take Algebra 1 before you take Algebra 2 or Calculus, something like that. In social studies, I'm trying to understand the basis of why it has to be in a particular order. I understand that, it just makes it easier to schedule and so forth, but if a person did want to take something like, say, one of the AP classes, like a US history or European, before like a AP US history, why is it so firm that you can't do that it has to be in this particular order? Just trying to understand it.
So I guess that's for one of our high school counselors and principals, and I guess that applies to other curricular areas outside of just social studies. You're speaking specifically in the social studies area.
Other subjects where it would matter, but things like English, I understand that you're progressing. In English, I could see every argument I was trying to think of, for instance, like nonfiction before you get into fiction. There's a logic to that. It's on the SAT, it's more practical from an education perspective, it edges out fiction. But in social studies, when you get on the level of especially in AP, they're really hardcore subjects and you have actually studied US history and you want to study it. It's a course that you want to take, but why would it have to be in that particular order?
I can begin conversation about this topic. Generally, most of our students will take the first 2 years of high school social studies in American history. And that would follow up what is happening at the middle level to a certain extent. And then in 11th grade, which is the last year of required social studies, world cultures, world history would be typically what students take. 12th grade is an elective year for social studies. So again, frequently students might take their AP course at that level, like an AP Psych, for example. But there are students who will, if they're interested in an AP course, take an AP US History course in 10th grade rather than the regular or honors history, US history course. So they can go out of order and sometimes do. Typically though, the order is American history for 2 years, world for 1 year, and then elective if they choose to stay in the social studies realm.
Okay, great. If you happen to have somebody who loves history and has really studied world history and US history and might want to take world history, like AP world history, ahead of AP US history, you don't see any major reason why?
Typically, I don't see it done, but counselors jump in.
I mean, I've had kids that come in from a different school that transfer in, and I've already had world history as a 9th grader. A lot of kids don't want to because it would be rare for a 9th grader to be sitting in 11th grade, predominantly 11th grade class, so they really don't want to go out of the sequence. And a lot of 9th graders are, not ready for an AP course. It's a college level course, and 13, 14 years old, they're just not ready for that. But I wouldn't say it's absolute because we have had kids come in that already have the background and are out of sequence per se. But they are given something up because, like I said, a lot of times they're with kids 2 years older than them and they're not happy with that.
Would you have anybody that's not out of sequence, let's just say that they're not just coming through our middle schools,
Yeah.
let's use that as an example, that would take a world history in 9th grade versus the US history?
I have not had anyone do it in 9th grade. We have had tech kids that go to MBIT that we have conflicts in their schedule and maybe one history doesn't fit. So we will, prioritize it and put the other history ahead of that. But again, they'd like to be with their peers a lot of times. And American, makes sense to take the first part of American Civ and then the second part of it to follow up. A lot of the kids want to do that.
And I imagine that there's times even in math and stuff, like there was a time in our school district where somebody didn't come in and take, I'm trying to think of the levels now in my head, but somebody didn't come in and take pre-algebra the first year. There was that first person. And then, in history, again, like I said, you would have to fit the person. You don't want everybody kind of jumping around because then, if their background doesn't fit it, then it doesn't work. And then you get the whole thing where somebody's like, hey, I want to do an honors, and somebody's recommending accelerate it, and they go into honors and they don't do well because it's just a different kind of level. But otherwise, the person fits. There's nothing like hardcore that says absolutely not. Thank you so much.
Are there new courses over the next few years that are looking to be offered as virtual or blended courses to offer more options in that as kids are starting to progress through high school, getting ready to go into college?
I think as a rule of thumb, we're encouraging our teachers to blend more and more of their courses so that students will have an opportunity, whether they're taking a virtual course or not, they will have, as time goes on, more and more opportunities within their traditional classes for the blended experience. So we are in transition in that regard. Every year, I think we re-establish what virtual courses will be offered, which ones have been popular with kids, and reassess, and we're always looking to add more.
I think this current school year, we offer 12 or 13, I can't remember. I think 4 are running, is that correct? So 4 are actually populated enough to run as courses. Renee taught one of our courses. You may want to speak to it as a person who lived it.
I did. I taught virtual honors anatomy for 2 years. And I would say the kids liked it, and I surveyed them at the end of the course, and they said they would do it again. They felt prepared for college, but it's hard to, I think it's a big jump, and some kids are a little bit scared because they know a teacher, they're going to see a teacher in a traditional classroom every day. They're going to remind them of their work. It's going to be up on the board, and they want that traditional Council Rock experience in science. It seems like they like the hands-on labs a little bit more, where they would have that a little bit less. We did offer it blended, where they did come in and make appointments to take their tests and make appointments for their labs. But if we have the numbers, we'll continue to offer it.
Yeah, I think actually for this year, we're probably pretty close to that 12 or 13 offerings. You know, and each of our curriculum coordinators meet within their departments, try to make sense of what course would be a good offering virtually, and then whether teachers want to teach it, and then we go through the course selection process and see if we get enough students signed up for it, as well as whether we can make it fit in their schedules.
It's surprising to us that our students aren't taking more virtual courses. I think Renee has hit the nail on the head when she said that our students like the Council Rock traditional experience, and we're encouraging it. And probably our most popular course right now is English 12, with, I believe we have 3 sections of it, semester course.
1 and then 2. Okay.
So they never meet the teacher in virtual, or you meet?
No, they meet the teacher back to school night. They could meet the teacher. They could make an appointment with the teacher. Some virtual teachers have certain clinic days. I did mine by appointment. They didn't have any problem finding me or us connecting. It was very flexible, the schedule. It worked, I think, extremely well for athletes who wanted to take a 9th period, who didn't want to miss a certain course that might be difficult for them to miss with their game schedule. I think the kids had a positive experience. It's just sometimes they're just afraid to take that leap.
And most of the courses had a combination of North and South students in the virtual course, so they were mixed.
Wonderful, which is, so if you're teaching a virtual course, it's not, it counts among the students' courses, they take so many classes. Where is the student during a period that would normally be, and they obviously schedule one less class?
If the student chose, they could schedule it whatever fit in their schedule best. So if they chose to take it first period, they had the option to come in to sign in after first period. Let's say they, had a busy workload and that worked for them, they would do their virtual at home. Otherwise, there was always a computer offered to them in the library. So their assigned period during the middle of the day, they would go to the library. If they chose to take it 9th period, which is the last period in high school, they were allowed to leave and do their course at home or go to work or whatever their other needs were. But locked in the middle of the day, they weren't allowed to leave school.
And right now, since if they were taking it periods 2 through 8, let's say, they were spread out over those periods. So you were getting maybe 3, 4, 5 students at any one time in the library. It wasn't all of them coming in at the same period. If it gets big, we've talked about how do we handle that, because we couldn't put 20 students in the library every period, or any period actually, to have them do that. So how we'd accommodate that and supervise it still needs to be answered, but we're not there yet. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was essentially going to ask the same question about the timing, because I know, like with my high schooler, if it was an option to take it, to be able to add another class, because she doesn't want to drop any of her academics, but she'd love to double up on sciences. And the only way for her to do that, it seems, is to do something like take gym over the summer, or, drop an instrument, which we've been trying not to do. But there are really, there are great electives that she's never going to take because she's trying to take 4 years of a language. And so I think if you could ever offer the virtual classes in a way for them to be able to take an extra class or a class over the summer that would be a Council Rock class, that we might see a little bit more students who are willing to do it. But, I understand the scheduling, that makes a great deal of sense. Or for the athletes, I think that's a great option. But for the middle of the day, it doesn't really offer much.
So we want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, I think in many ways, we are confined by our 6 instructional periods, 55 minutes length. It works for us from a teaching and learning perspective, but maybe compared to some of your more traditional high schools with 8 periods or a block schedule 4 and 4, it does limit maybe some of the opportunities for electives, but it works. It works for us. I think more of our graduates, when they come back from the college and university experience, are talking about cyber classes, virtual learning. So we very much want to try to embed that in what we do moving forward. You know, we kind of talk about having a goal that at some point everyone will touch a virtual course, so they're at least prepared. Because there's a lot of misconceptions as well. Like many students, I think initially when we first kind of came out with this a few years back, oh, it's going to be an easy course and just get on, click around a little bit. Not the case. Actually, we found the courses are pretty rigorous.
Yeah.
And if you're not an independent learner, self-motivated, it's going to be a tough road. So that's been a little bit of a challenge, just kind of overcoming that mindset. But I think the good thing is the program, even though it's, you know, small baby steps, incrementally, we're moving forward. And like Susan said, even if it's not an actual virtual course, I think you're seeing more of our instructors do innovative, technological, you know, flipped classrooms and all kinds of other activities that are pretty cool.
Yeah, it's important to know that our virtual courses are Council Rock courses, so we're not purchasing courses. Some high schools do purchase courses through, you know, programs that are virtual in nature and are run by, it could be run by your teachers or by the teachers of the virtual program, but our courses are actually written to mirror what we teach in the classroom. So it's a little bit unique in that way.
And just to make this point, even though it's a little off point, it isn't our intention to provide unlimited opportunities for students to take more and more courses, because we're also very cognizant of the stress level that students have. So we're trying to achieve the right balance with the right program. So that's why we have different alternatives for different students, hopefully meeting all their needs. But to keep, you know, I can take one more and one more and one more. It's a lot. It's a lot for our kids, a lot for our best kids who are doing everything else in the world too.
I'd like to understand the scheduling of more virtual courses. So you referenced first period and ninth period and then a couple of periods in between. So if a student, let's just say because they're working, chooses to say virtual course for the ninth period, does that mean it has to be done in that ninth period window?
No, they can do it anytime they wanted to. So some of the students I found would catch up a lot on their, over the weekend on their work. They like the flexibility if they had a calculus test or a physics test. I would let them make an appointment. You can make your test appointment with me or the librarian within this 3-day window. So they did like that flexibility, but they can do their work on their own time. I would post like a unit's worth of work for them for the next 3 weeks.
As a follow-up, so is there a maximum amount of virtual courses that we cap our students at? Can they only take one
We've limited it to 2 in a given year.
in a year?
Yes, 2 each year. We've had a couple of students who have signed up for 2 over the past couple of years, right?
This is the first that I've had.
First for you?
Put
Okay.
down.
We've had a couple
Yeah.
that have taken 2.
Most are taking 1, but we've had a few students who have taken 2.
I think as more courses actually run with the enrollment increase, for example, in English, we ran accelerated comp for a bit and then it didn't run, there wasn't enough enrollment, so it didn't run this year, but we're offering 4 this year. So if we have enough students, then that would give them more opportunities to take more courses.
What's the drawback in offering this? Does it take more time to offer 4 courses over 2? It feels like, because you're not live, it's not live instruction, so it feels like it's relatively easy. But
Well, the difference is that the course has to be built. In other words, we have no virtual courses. So if we choose to run a new course or a new teacher to run a course, they actually have to build the virtual course, which is a pretty significant amount of work. And then to do that and not have it run is our concern. So we've until we see, I think, some growth in the number of students who are not only signing up, but our ability to run those courses, we've kind of picked the teachers who said they were willing to take their course, make it virtual. We do a lot of work with the counselors and the teachers to make sure that just because a student wants the virtual course, we don't necessarily know if they are, they have the right personality, the right work ethic to be self-motivated to take a virtual course. So they do some vetting when students sign up and make sure the student understands what's in front of them. Like Mr. Funk had said, some kids thought virtual is nice. I'll just sit back and click a couple things and it's all well. And they found out it really wasn't. You have to be really have a great ability to express yourself verbally and in writing and keep up on your work. Teachers have to continue to monitor it and keep posting work. So it's a unique learning experience. But we do think it's a good experience for students, and we'd like to see more take it. We'd like to see our program go and get a little bit bigger. And we think it'll prepare kids not only for college, but any of us in the work environment know that a lot of the learning we do is virtual too. And it'd be good for students to get that sense in high school before they're exposed to it, where it's going to be a little bit more complicated for them.
What grades are classes offered virtual? Is it just seniors?
At middle school on up, there are some courses at the middle level.
Well, middle level that are taking high school courses, not middle level courses. So those that, are advanced in mathematics, where we used to shuttle students to the high school, they're now taking that Algebra 2 course virtually. So they don't have to miss any of their middle school program. They don't have to get up an hour earlier to get to the high school and extend their day. So, and that's worked out well from all that I've heard. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, it gives kids the opportunity to participate in the things that they normally might be otherwise excluded from. So our resource activity period, which happens in the morning, many of our students are involved in music programs, and oftentimes if they're taking the Honors Algebra 2 course at the high school, they may miss out on an opportunity during some of those ensemble rehearsals. They can still participate in it, but then our student council meets during that time. My personal favorite, which is the Winter Classic Floor Hockey Tournament, perhaps they will do something like those fun things in the morning. So they do have an opportunity to take that course virtually, and then they can, there's a scheduled block of time within their school day that they would normally have math. They have a computer and a place to go, and plenty of resources to surround them too. Our teachers are really helpful.
And I believe every 8th grade student selected virtual this year out of all 3 of our middle schools. None of those students are, am I correct? Am I missing anybody? They're all doing it virtually, right? The Algebra 2, 8th graders. I think we actually have a 7th grader who's also in Algebra 2, who's taking it virtually.
This is probably a silly question, but how are you made aware of these situations where these courses are offered? Like for instance, Algebra 2 in 8th grade and so on and so forth. Are they in the course manuals?
And we really stress it on program planning night, where the parents come out and they have the opportunity to learn more about it with actual teachers.
So you just have to ask the counselors, then you go to the counselor and they'll be able to tell you more about it.
We try to speak to our students as well as they show interest, and sometimes they just need some flexibility with their schedule. So as they're picking electives or as they're wanting to move to maybe another area, like you said, double up in a subject area, a lot of times that can be a solution to that. So a lot of the virtuals have some prerequisites to them. For example, like the Honors Anatomy and the Accelerated, they have a grade level kind of that you have to be in, 10th or above for, say, an Accelerated Psychology. But we try to make them we try to inform as many as we can in reference to the options that they have. But a good place to start would be like with your child's counselor and say, hey, what's available? And then we can kind of go over it with you.
Okay.
And all the teachers at the high school level meet with each student individually to make recommendations. So a lot of times it will be a conversation between the teacher and the student when they're meeting about their course for next year.
While we're talking about competing for students' time and how many periods a day, a couple of years ago we used to, do we still require students who are participating in band as a co-curricular activity? Do we still require them to take a course in music called band?
So in other words, if you're going to be in the marching band, is there a particular course you must take during the school day to be a member of that?
I believe they did start allowing kids in the band that aren't in that class.
But most do.
Most of them.
Most do.
Yeah, most of them want to be to get the instruction, but
But I mean, think we're having before we want to get back to this.
More flexibility has been
Yeah.
introduced.
What else?
There's especially in the news, a lot of talk about other schools flipping the start times. So elementary would start first and then high school would start last. Is that something Council Rockwood is considering, or is that just things other schools are testing out? Do you all know about that? That they say teenagers need the most sleep, so they should technically sleep later than the elementary school kids, and then the middle school would still be in the middle, so they wouldn't change much. But has there been talk about trying that out, or not? Just curious.
I can speak to that. Do I need to?
I was gonna throw it to you.
I have to be at work at the same time, it doesn't matter to me, I was just curious.
I wouldn't want to make a start time. To be completely honest. It's a position and an argument that is almost, it's one that's hard to argue with. The Pediatricians Association, 2 years ago maybe, came out with this seminal study with a very strong position for teenagers in particular, that a later start time would be beneficial for them. The issues with it are many. So that's the problem with it. It in my opinion, would never be up to a singular school district to be able to make this move on your own in a vacuum and expect it to work. Because you think about the world in which all of these folks live, from athletics to all the different clubs and all the different activities that take place after school hours in particular, but not only. And those times have to line up. So now if you have this one school district or another school district out here that choose to go an hour offset, you're just always going to be fighting that hour offset. So I think what you're seeing is more and more momentum around this issue. And so is there conversation going on? There is. It's going on, sort of behind the scenes, but there's really good conversation going on. And I would say that conversation is going on locally all throughout the Delaware Valley. So the 4-county region, I think that conversation is going on. What's going to come of it? Who knows? Because you start talking, and we heard the references here about students who might want to take a virtual course in part, or maybe it just works because they have this part-time job, right? And so they want to get out of that last period and go to that job. So now this has that negative impact. There, you have sports. Now we just sprung ahead, so we get a little more sunlight. But early on, we fight the sunlight. You have issues that are present there without a doubt, and you have to flip it, right? So our younger kids have to go to school earlier because of transportation runs, just bus runs. Otherwise, the whole entire proposition becomes completely unaffordable. But is it something as a school district we would at least be interested in having legitimate, genuine conversation about? I feel confident as a superintendent in saying yes, absolutely. Where would we ultimately settle on it? I don't know, because you've got a lot of voices, and I don't want to sit here and try to represent those voices. But there's a lot of legitimacy to that argument. And is there stuff happening behind the scenes just to try to network and connect with different school districts and see what interest might be there in other places and what momentum might be able to be created? There is. That said, there has been this level of interest for a while. So this isn't something that has just sprung up all of a sudden. We'll see where it goes. I would say it's stronger now than what it's probably ever been, but it's also something this isn't something that's brand new either. There's no easy solution to it. So when you're in some of these states like a Maryland or Virginia where you have county school systems, it's a lot easier to do it. When you're in Pennsylvania with 500 school districts, it's a lot more difficult to do it. But if you can get an entire group and, the Suburban One League, just looking at it athletically, right? Forget about everything else, just athletics alone, encompasses multiple counties. When you think about the swath of land that covers, it's a lot of school districts, it's a lot of superintendents, it's a lot of school boards, it's a lot of just publics, it's a lot of taxpayers and parent bases that have to buy into this and be okay with it. So it's a big undertaking, but the short answer is yes. There is interest and there is some movement that's being attempted anyway.
Even in its simplest form, just sharing of Middle Bucks Institute of Technology, you'd have to have those 4 districts agree to shift that time frame because we have the association on a small level like that.
It's a huge undertaking.
It is, yeah. There's a lot involved with it. Absolutely. That's a great question.
Could you speak to the process that's used to assess faculty and staff? And if somebody isn't performing to a certain level, what can be done with faculty or staff to help improve or move?
Okay. 3 principals up here, so.
Now we have a pretty extensive supervision evaluation process, and now the state kind of has introduced their teacher effectiveness model, so that kind of plays into it a little bit. Under that model, people are evaluated formally and informally. If there is a need for some remediation or intervention, that teacher may be placed on what we call a needs improvement plan. So the supervisor would meet with that instructor and kind of go over some of the areas of need and kind of develop a concrete plan to attack whatever the issues are.
Mm-hmm. And how long do you stay on that remediation process?
Well, I think that depends on the teacher and how things are progressing. Hopefully it's a short term. It may be something that the teacher would be on that plan, improvement plan for the entire academic year. It just really depends on the individual situation.
Yeah.
Beyond the actual teacher observation, the direct formal observation model, we also have some differentiated supervision and evaluation that we do. So for example, professional staff may opt to do professional writing 1 year. They may participate in what we call collaborative colleagues, where they kind of join with other peers to tackle a problem. They may do PLCs. You're going to hear a lot about that. PLCs, professional learning communities. So.
And has there ever been an instance where there's been somebody who hasn't met their performance and they've been asked to be removed?
Yes.
Yeah, the state defines now how we evaluate teachers.
Right.
So up through about 2 years ago, districts had a lot more latitude in defining that program. It is now law that each school district must evaluate in a certain way, including student assessment results, the observation that principals do and administrators do on teachers. Teachers do learning objectives that they create and submit, and then if they meet that plan, they're given some credit for that. So there's a whole pretty complex formula that goes in to determine whether a teacher is satisfactory, needs improvement, distinguished, unsatisfactory, all the terms that apply to that.
They don't tie too much to the statewide test scores, do they? I mean, I was a high school teacher, so I know all of this, but like, it's been years and eons ago since I taught before I had my kids, so it's changed. But they don't tie too much to like a Keystone or a PSSA, do they?
Yeah, that's
There's a piece. So when we kind of introduced the staff, it's a very complex model,
Right.
but we kind of use PI, and 50% is the classroom observation piece, which I think is vital. That's
I would
good.
hope that would be more.
And then there are other percentages of the pie, but right now about 15% is related directly to like Keystone or PSSA scores, and we call it the PBOS model. So it's not just necessarily how your students are performing, it's also whether incrementally you've taken your students from like point A to point B in terms of improvement.
Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily matter what level student you teach, it's more about improvement.
And that also is dependent on if you're a Keystone teacher as well.
True.
Because if you're not, then you wouldn't have that particular piece in play. There is some some part of the calculation for all teachers and for the school that does take your scores into account.
And PSSA scores factor in also for our elementary schools and middle schools like the Keystones do for the high schools.
It's really more for Mrs. McCarthy. You've both been in the high schools when they've been various sizes. And right now, one of the high schools has 400 more students than the other high school. And I guess in your experience and your time doing it, can you detect that in your interaction with the students and the nature of the classes that realistically each grade at South really has about 100 more students than the comparable grade at North? And I wonder if in your experience, you both taught in both situations. Is it something that's perceptible? Can you sense it? Can you have a difference?
I think when you look at me and my career, I've worked in our school when it had classes of almost 1,000. So there is a definite difference in a class of 800, 900, and a class of 400 or 500. So I don't see, the difference between 400 and 500 as much as I have seen it in the past, simply because of my perspective. I think, there are pros and cons, even with the number, the differential of about 100 students. It's more difficult for us to offer some of the electives when we have smaller numbers, because we don't have, as many kids, and kids are spread out more. So that, I think, would be a definite negative for us the smaller we get.
Yeah, I think demographically at South, we've actually remained fairly consistent in my 9 years. We're kind of in that 1,900 to 2,100, or more 2,100 now. So we are about 400 students more. So it's not something that you go out in the corridors during transition time and you have a noticeable difference.
Yeah.
I think there's a benefit to having a large school community in terms of some of the co-curriculars and some of the opportunities for students and school spirit and all kinds of other positive things. But there is, and I don't know what the tipping point is, but I guess I would draw the analogy just like the classroom. There's a lot of evidence in terms of instruction that maybe smaller class size could be more effective. I don't know where that is for a large high school community in terms of, what would be that tipping point for the ideal population. 500 students per class kind of works for us, and that's kind of what we're used to, and it just kind of flows. I do agree with Susan that I used to hear stories when Council Rock was one high school, and just the logistics of doing things like a school-wide assembly takes on a whole new meaning when you're trying to move 1,000 students in a grade level. And actually I jumped on, I think, in 2002, and I was fascinated by how involved they were in the precision of like a school-wide assembly. And I said, why are you spending so much time with this? Well, the reason why they spent so much time to move 1,000 kids was
To make it happen.
Yeah. So
Otherwise, we'd be all
to go from that to
playing around.
500, not a problem.
And again, it wasn't that long ago that we were sort of in the position that South is in, and South in our position. Now, not exactly, but we had a couple of hundred more students than South did, and now it's reversed. I don't really notice that big a difference, looking at it. I think, Al, when you say the word tipping point, I don't think we're at a tipping point at this point, having experienced it not so long ago.
I don't know if you guys can answer this or not, but a few years ago, the big trend for professional development, we all heard that the teachers were signing about iPads and how to use that technology. Do you see a new trend, kind of, where the teachers are trending towards something, or something that's new and upcoming that teachers are really wanting to grasp and learn about, so that they can bring it into the classroom to kind of get kids ready for the next kind of wave of technology or learning to get them ready for high school? Either the middle school or the high school level?
It seems that a lot of our teachers are interested in Chromebooks, as something to use. The iPads never really caught on across the board. Maybe in isolated areas it's helpful, but for us at the high school level, it seems that Chromebooks might be the next
Do you find that
horizon.
teachers are doing their professional development workshops that they're leaning toward learning about how to integrate that kind of technology into the classroom? Is there something else that they're?
Well, the big thing is for us, right now is the LMS system, which is, what is used for the virtual and blended experiences. So I would say that is probably our top priority right now, is to incorporate that into our staff in service so that they understand it and can move forward with it in their classroom.
I just want to be clear what an LMS is. That's the learning management system. So for us, it's Canvas within Council Rock is the system we're using. That's what was referenced.
I was just going to offer, I know on Friday at our most recent in-service, Holland Middle did a lot with the Google Classroom, and Barb Tiger led a lot of that as she's sitting in the audience with you. She could speak to it better. I did not actually. I attended something in another building, but when you asked the question, I immediately thought of Barb's efforts to try to train the staff and work with the staff on some of the different features of a Google Classroom and some of the apps that they can use and integrate. And that was the whole program, correct, Barb?
Yes. Professional development was teaching the staff Google Classroom. The students all have Google Drive accounts. It's fabulous for sharing. I have 2 children in the district, and last night my middle schooler was sitting there with 2 of his buddies working on their science lab that was due today. And they're typing away, and somebody's doing paragraph 1, someone else is doing paragraph 2, somebody said in the chat on the side, oh, you have the data for such and such, and it showed up very well. And it was a fabulous resource. So I know at Holland Middle School, we are definitely using Google Drive, and many of the teachers are starting to implement Google Classroom as something that is a platform that we're seeing is very successful. That can be done with an iPad. You can put the Google app onto the iPad, the Chromebook, laptops, desktops, or something. And at home, and in the public libraries. You name it, it's there.
Rich, you're going to add something?
Yeah, I think we're catching on to the technology wave. So we're not so much what is the hot item that's happening, it's more of a mindset that we're approaching with not necessarily jumping on any one giving thing and making large investments in it, because we know that until we field test it and make sure that it works for what we're doing, it doesn't seem quite appropriate. The simple things like the Google Drive or Google Classroom are real simple for us to use because it's a sharing tool and can be used from anyone's device. The other part of it is watching what kids bring to us and then catching on with their wave and utilizing them as sort of, okay, so what's new with them that we can jump on? Most of our middle school kids now have phones, and we've jumped on allowing them or inviting that into the classroom and making it work for us. So whereas a teacher may have historically had to bring a kid up to the front desk, log on to your H drive so that we can present, the child has that on their iPhone, they just connect right to the Apple TV, which is in the classroom, and then they can, there's less time spent logging into those things. And like Mr. Funk said, with a flipped classroom, kids are really good at navigating a website, understanding where to pick up the videos on YouTube and what work they need to do. And that begins to set them up for the opportunity for things like virtual classrooms. So I think we've jumped away from purchasing items that seem new age and really, okay, so we understand that technology is sort of pervasive and it enters into our classrooms and we utilize it. We look at it with a different lens now and utilize things that we can without making large investment jumps.
So do we have Google Classrooms in the high school?
So we had a workshop on Google Docs in the high school, and the coordinators had a workshop on Google Classroom. So.
I'm a part of the technology committee, and part of the discussion there was that the LMS system, learning management systems, offer more for the high school teacher, especially in teaching virtual courses. Google Classroom can be a part of it, but it can't do as much as an LMS system can if you're going to do it full tilt.
But the short answer is yes. They use Google Classroom or Google Docs in the high schools. Yes.
So my next question is for Renee about STEM classes. I know you're doing it, what, 12th grade now?
Yes, there's a honors research in STEM at both high school, well, at North and the South Student Shuttle to North. It's called Honors Research in STEM for 12th graders. And next year, I believe it's going to be offered at North and South because there's enough interest in both schools.
Just seniors and?
Yes. There are topics, I mean, the kids have different abilities. Some have been in science fairs since 7th grade. Some are in the class and have never been in a science fair before. So some are continuing a project that's ongoing, might have been a couple of years. And some are starting from scratch. And a lot of the projects are engineering based. We went to see them at North. They just came back from a competition at Del Val and also the regional competition in Beth Salem for PJS. I think we're sending 62 kids to Penn State for first place. That's
Yeah,
7th to 12th grade.
it's unbelievable.
So I think the high school STEM course will be growing as the middle school continues to grow as well.
Right now, I know there's some after-school clubs in the middle school. Is there any talk of somehow working more STEM into the actual curriculum of the middle schools?
The curriculum in the middle school is pretty packed. We are talking with,
Possibly during the tech ed?
yes, in the tech ed program with engineering. We've gone out to see other districts that have actually, Downingtown has a STEM high school. So we ventured out there and we're having a meeting after spring break, right, Ben? To talk about STEM.
In past years, when students were trying to get their transcripts out, the summer often posed a problem, letters of recommendation, so it posed a problem, and I believe it was more administrative than it was just difficult with the system or something. There was a problem, I remember this probably 4 or 5 years ago. Is that different? Is it different now than it was? I'm not very clear, I don't remember exactly how it was, but there was some difficulty in getting the transcripts out over the summer.
Well, it's the official transcript that's not complete because the senior schedules are not complete until the beginning of the school year. So when kids come in June and ask for an official transcript, we can get them a transcript. They're 9th, 10th, and 11th grade year, but 12th grade won't be on there because typically, at least at North, the final schedules aren't even set until August. So I think that's, you know,
It was some complexity.
And I can even say too, with our use of Naviance currently, there's an online transcript that we use through what's called eDocs. So now what a kid can do is meet with us, we can sit with them, and as far as transcript goes, we can actually send that out right then and there. And it's an instantaneous send, it's all digital, it's all online.
So if the universities are set to receive it?
Yep. The majority. There's still a handful of schools that want it mailed or want it, you know, like Penn State, we use their web counselor system, but the majority of schools actually use Naviance, they use the eDocs, and it makes that very, very quickly. And then if, you know, a letter of recommendation is required as well, we even have that set up through Naviance where we can send that also in either the same transmission or a different one.
I think you're hitting on the issue as I recall it now, because that was the challenge we've seen, that there was a bunch of paper involved to move things along, even up to the point of meeting and not being able, we haven't instituted an ability for students to request that online, so we'd actually just totally great.
We don't have the students actually do that at South. A lot of times we like to have a conversation with the kid to make sure that what's the school's requiring, the student knows that they're requiring that, so we can work them through that process, at least initially. And then any future schools, they can then kind of just drop off their transcript request form. Because it's confidential information too, we want to have the okay through a signature that allows us then to send that. So we still actually ask the student to provide us with a transcript request. But yeah, we haven't gone to an online request system yet since that.
I think we're like 2 or 3 years into the electronic, so second or third year?
Yeah,
Third?
I believe it's 3,
It's third year, yeah, so.
Yeah.
It's somewhat recent.
I think you're answering what the weakness was, I just couldn't remember exactly how it's framed.
Yeah, makes everything easier and quicker and less things get lost.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
And stuffing envelopes took a lot of my time in the fall.
Other questions? Or comments?
I was just gonna, I thought I was speaking up. I was just gonna go back to the original question that was asked about accelerated 9 in English. And the only reason I say so is because I have a high schooler and a middle, I have 4, so they're all over the place. But my 8th grade student's teacher did specifically say to her when she was going through course recommendations that it's a shame that there's not an accelerated option, because she felt like there's a big chunk of kids who really are missing. They're not quite ready for honors, but they're past the academic. And so they're kind of maybe going to academic and really just sitting there bored out of their mind, or they're in honors and they're really scraping to just hang on. So I don't know if that's, I know there's scheduling and I understand both sides of the story, I really do, but if that could be put back in there for those students, because when they miss that window in 9th grade to go to 10th grade, if they're sitting in academic and it's extremely easy for them and they're getting 110%, and then they want to bump up to honors in 10, it's hard to do that. You know, so that accelerated option does give them that piece of the puzzle where they have that stepping stone to move on. And unfortunately, as sad as it sounds, it does affect transcripts for colleges. You know, they do like to see that progression, and, you know, it'd be nice to have that in place. I have honors kids, but I could see where the academic, I mean, I still have 2 in elementary, so maybe they would want that accelerated option, but it would be a nice, really nice thing to put back into place. You know, if it would ever be offered again, because I think you're missing a chunk of kids.
I hope I wasn't misleading, saying that the
I
scheduling was keeping that
No, I
conversation
completely-
out. It's
I
good. I'm
understand.
just telling you, it's a big picture. And
Yeah, I
that's one of
understand, because I have a
yeah.
sophomore at North, and I get the scheduling. I mean, it's crazy. God bless you, counselors. I mean, I understand that it's crazy, but just that one, I just feel like that chunk of kids is really, and the 8th grade teachers are saying it to the students, at least in Newtown Middle. They're like, there's a bunch of you that are missing you're getting lost. So, and it's a shame. It's just a shame. That's just a comment.
Okay, fair enough. The right set of ears heard that.
To be honest, I think if we go back to when we were junior high, not middle school, it was 7, 8, and 9, and there was never an accelerated at that point. I think this really is a remnant of the fact that the structure was what it was. We moved the 9th grade to the high school, and then we realized, okay, now it's a 9th grade transition year. So there's definitely interest on the 8th grade side, and there's some 9th grade teachers who are interested too. It's just, it's a really important decision to make when they also are bumping up in their other levels as well.
Right.
I guess that's why so many people are moving cautiously when they talk about it.
Right, right. And there's a 9th grade English teacher, honors teacher, who's really, really tough. And then if you have like that middle ground for those kids, it might give them a little bit more willingness to maybe find some middle ground and not be so scared of that honors option.
This is more of a transition question as we're going through course selection. In one of our previous meetings, we talked about how the 6th grade teachers are not quite as in touch with what's going on in the 7th grade and getting these kids prepared for that transition. How are the 8th grade teachers being made aware of the requirements and the different things that are involved in the 9th grade classes so that they can make those important recommendations for getting kids placed in the right course levels? I mean, are they going and visiting with them? Are they working on them with professional development during workshops? Like, how are they knowing? I mean, they know what the kids can do in the classroom in 8th grade. How are they knowing, what tools are they being given to be able to evaluate where they should be placed going into 9th grade?
So you probably get a couple of perspectives from both the principal who oversees the broad process and then the counselors who work across the grade levels as well as the teacher side of it. So maybe we can get all 3 perspectives. So why don't you start, Rich, because you oversee
Sure. I would say that our both 7th grade and our 8th grade teachers are very aware of what's happening at either side of the transition for students. Most especially in 8th grade, our teachers have combined meetings with Andrea where there's a lot of discussion about curriculum. In fact, it's been much of the focus of our attention over the past several years about what's the progression of curriculum. So I would say that our teachers are very aware of what's coming and where they're coming from. The luxury from 7th to 8th grade is that we teach in the same building and we meet frequently departmentally. The conversations from 6th to 7th grade and 8th to 9th grade are more frequent than you might might otherwise think. And the teachers are very clear on the really limited scope of courses that a kid will take the next year, but they're also aware of the progression of courses as it moves through. So I think the teachers are, their recommendations, and we sort of preach this to parents during course selection time, is folks, you need to understand that your teacher's recommendations are very reliable. They understand the content going and coming, and they know your child's position within, embedded in the content that we're in currently. So from our perspective, there is very good conversation on both sides of it. The one piece that I can't say totally is the comfort level of the sixth grade teacher knowing where they're coming, because I can't speak for those folks. For ours, I think I'm comfortable in saying they're very aware of what's happening at both levels.
How about from counselor, high school counselor perspective, the sense of that?
I would echo what Mr. Holohan said in the sense that when we talk to our different departments within our building, I know there's quite a few initiatives that they have with the middle level, trying to outline the coursework, the rigor, the progression, so that those staff members can be aware and can make the best recommendations that they can. I know just from my own office in counseling, there's many times where I'm even speaking with the counselor from the middle level, and we're doing a little bit of casing, in reference to a child's schedule, or a parent makes a phone call to me from the middle school at the urging of the counselor from the middle level. So always open, always available to discuss it, to discuss the progression. I know that there's a lot of conversation that's being had between the two buildings. Say exactly what you said in the sense that there's a lot of collaboration.
I think from a curriculum perspective, we, about a year or two ago, the core coordinators put together a document that listed very clearly the expectations of the 7th and 8th grade teachers so that the 6th grade recommending teachers would have that batch of knowledge. It was much clearer than I think it had been previously. And because the 7th and 8th grade teachers live with that document, then they have that same communication with the 9th grade teachers. And to be honest, it sounds silly, but with email, constant contact is literal every day. There are emails flying back and forth. Do you still do this document? Is your research paper still this? Are you sure that we still have this? And because we are so close geographically speaking, we can really get down and meet when we need to and bring the documents. And when there are recommendations going from 6th to 7th and 8th to 9th, I've been there. There are team meetings where the 7th grade teachers will sit and look over every child's data and say, which class do you belong in? And because of that conversation, I think that awareness is there just that very next year when we're sending the kids off to the 9th grade. And those teachers who are receiving the recommendations can see anything that's questionable, and they'll have a conversation with the teacher just to make sure, well, why did you choose this instead of this? And then we'll come to an agreement. So I think we've really come to a great point of streamlining as best we can. And there are always those kids who are recommended for one thing, and then we get them and realize, maybe you could be challenged a little bit more, and we'll address that when we can. But I think it's been getting better.
I was going to offer one of the things that I talk about with students and parents when I have the opportunity on that program planning piece is teachers are making recommendations by all of that information that you just heard about, but also what the student shows them. And what the teachers don't see is what's happening at home. They see maybe the student that gets an A but doesn't realize it's taking 2 or 3 hours at night to prep for those tasks, to get ready to get that A. And so that's where you sometimes see those mismatches, where the students, who are struggling for a reason that, the teacher or the parent's very intimately aware of, but the teacher maybe isn't seeing, they're seeing the struggle. And so they have concerns about them meeting the rigor that's outlined in some of that communication. And so that's where I think everyone has to work together. And if as a parent, you're not sure, I always encourage to talk to the teacher and find out why they made the recommendation they made. And maybe through that, collaboration between teacher and parent, you can figure out what makes the most sense as well. Because there's pieces that everyone has as far as the information that would help us get it right. But unless we're sharing it, it's not going to happen.
And just a couple of years ago, to give teachers that perspective, the big perspective, we had every 6th grade teacher spend a half day in the middle school to not only see the subject areas that they would make recommendations for, but also to get a perspective of what a student experiences when they go to middle school. We had all of our 7th grade teachers go to elementary school to see where kids were coming from. We had every 8th grade teacher go to our high schools and spend a half day there, and all of our 9th grade teachers spend a half day in the middle school so that they could put the broad perspective of what life is like at those different levels into their thinking about their recommendations. It was a great experience.
I mean, I can say my personal experience, my recommendations for both my kids have been wonderful. I was just curious how that process went about, that these teachers, in my experience, have been able to get it so right. And for a lot of people that I've talked to, that it seems to be that they're getting it right, so just curious how that process happened.
Good. I want to build off something, but take a slightly different tack on something you said. You made very, like you said, they don't see what goes on with the kid at home struggling 2 hours to get the A. And as you introduced yourself, you also introduced yourself as being part of the CARES team. And as those of us who are on the board, we often see parts of the CARES team come up when we've had some discipline issue and it's involved in reactive response. So while you're on audience, say for a few minutes, tell us about the proactive activities of the CARES team, and recognizing it's just the point of the spear. There's a whole bunch. It's not just the CARES team. There's a whole bunch of people involved. And then, just because you're on audience, what else would make that more effective? But no pressure.
On the spot. And I'm trying to figure out where to start and interject into that.
It's like a mosquito in a news column.
Well, I think there's a lot of different aspects to this. I think the middle level, which is where I'm working, we see a lot of introductory behavior. So I would say most of the students who come to CARES, which is our version of the student assistance program, Council Rock calls it CARES, Children at Risk in an Educational Setting. It's to identify students who have barriers to education that are not academically based. So we're looking at, certainly you mentioned policy violations where we're reactive. I would say in the middle level, we see a lot more of introductory behaviors. We're not seeing as many in the middle level that are policy violations. So we're seeing teachers who are concerned and say that they see a shift in students' behavior or performance, and they're not sure what's going on, but they're feeling comfortable that it's not an academically based concern. So they'll ask, and we'll start gathering some data and looking at, are there interventions that we can put in place? Perhaps it's more structure for a student. Perhaps it's reaching out, working with a family and finding some community resources or supports that would help out, maybe addressing a mental health need that otherwise hasn't been identified yet. So we're looking at that. Maybe there's already treatment going on and we need to collaborate with the people providing that treatment to boost a child's program at school and allow them to be more successful. And I think some of those things happen on a more proactive level, certainly, than sometimes is noticed. And some of those conversations occur that I think we do good work, but it's not often acknowledged. I know at our high school level, yes, there's certainly more students that end up in the system, I think, that are a result of a more reactive to policy violation, but they also have a lot of support groups that they're running. One of my struggles at the middle levels were smaller buildings. And so we maybe, and I'll communicate with my colleagues at the high school level and they'll say, well, there's a great group that'll do a program for you or a program that'll do a group for you in your school, but we'll find we don't have as many students with the issue where, my two buildings are around 500 compared to a high school of 2,000. So how many students have the issue? How many students want intervention? And how many students and parents will consent to the intervention? And now all of a sudden you start whittling it down. It's hard sometimes to get those groups, but I think at our high school level, we do a lot more with groups that are trying to be more proactive instead of reactive. So that is happening. And then it's also, we've done a very nice job in my two buildings, I'll speak for, of getting peer referrals. And when we have students referring other students, they're getting things to us long before we as staff are going to know. And staff refer based on behaviors that they're seeing. And our student referrals are saying this is the issue because they know, because they're texting and they're reading the Snapchat and everything else. So our teachers are saying something's off, this student's lost focus and their grades are suffering. And the peer referral saying, my friend's depressed and they're having thoughts of harming themselves. Those are two entirely different. So on the teacher side, we think we're being proactive and trying to reach out when we see signs, but our student referrals very often, now we're responding to a crisis or a moment of need. Did I answer anyway?
No, as you say, no, your point is, and that was why I asked you, is that it's under the covers, so much of it, and as board, public, we don't know what's going on. So that's why was a two-part question, which is what's going on, and you gave us that. And the second part was pointedly, the resources to do it. So, I mean, that we should know more as a community, what the resources are you need and understand them.
I think we spend a lot of time, so monthly I will meet with the other CARES coordinators both at the high school and my counterpart in Newtown Middle School. We also work with the social workers. We're constantly trying to find resources that are out there in the community, build relationships. Very often the relationships that we can establish with those community resources prior to needing that goes a long way to making it an effective transfer for a student and for a family to access those resources. So we do a lot of work and we're consistently meeting to try to identify those. Again, there's some programs that I feel like we don't take great advantage of in the middle, but some of it's just the numbers game. You can't have a group with 2 kids. It's just not gonna work. So I think there's a lot out there. And then there's just a lot that we do. I do a lot of collaboration and consultation with my counselors and helping them work more effectively with students, And so there's a lot that's just, it's very behind the scenes. I don't have a strong sense of lacking. I'm glad to know that you're interested, and I'll let you know after our next meeting what we all would like to have. But I will bring that back and is there an open checkbook that came with it? No, I'll ask and see if there's anything that, that we feel like we need, but right now, put on the spot, I can't think of anything.
No, I was just asking from the ounce prevention perspective. Thank you, you did very well, Chris.
Thank you.
So I have a question. So you would be the entity that would have you with cyberbullying, is what you're saying?
And again, I'll let my high school counselors jump in at some point here, but I mean, in the middle level, my role gets blurred a lot with the counselors. We work a lot together. So there are some issues where, yes, I think it does come to the level that maybe we'll do a formal CARES assessment and gathering some information and trying to find out. There are other times where I think our counseling staff at the middle level deal with a lot more of those issues. And so they may come to me and ask about, are there resources, are there things that we're not, thinking of that would help the student? Or, they'll ask and bounce some ideas off of me as far as the angles of it. I think at the high school level,
I would agree with you that we work very closely. They say it takes a village. Some of the kids see the CARES coordinators and they see their counselor. There are some kids that wouldn't get to school every day unless they had somebody to talk to. So I think having, working as a team is really helpful to have, both aspects and even to collaborate together. Like if I'm working with a student and it's just not working, to be able to go to one of the CARES coordinators and say, hey, what else could we do? Is extremely helpful. And being proactive, they do run a lot of groups that you talked about. And we also collaborate from the middle school to the high school, the CARES teams, and all the counselors. So the kids that may need some extra support when they come up, we're well aware of that in advance. So we can be proactive with them. Instead of waiting for them to fall when they transition in, we can meet with them, right off the bat.
You spoke about Instagram and Snapchat and some of the other apps.
Yes.
Just public service announcement, we're having one March 30th at Council Rock North 7 p.m. for parents. And I just wanted to ask about that, like how we would get other programs in the Raising Great Kids series, or subject. I know it has to be your approval, right, Dr. Fraser? Either Raise a Great Parent, Raise a Great Kids series.
Sure.
It's your approval, how do we get more subjects?
Yep.
This group here?
Bring them my way. Yeah, look, when it comes to, and, Mr. Deska knows, we've just dealt with an issue here, there was a relatively difficult one here in recent weeks. We can't keep up, right? As adults, we know that we can't keep up. So the more that we can expose moms and dads to what's going on out there, the better off we all are. So bring the ideas to me, and I will also bring ideas to you. And we'll put together a nice suite, a nice platform together, and then we'll advertise it and put it out there and try to get the audience that we need, because our kids, certainly not just in Council Rock, but all over the place, what's happening within the realm of technology. Even the police authorities are having a hard time keeping up with some of it. Much less school districts having a hard time, or moms and dads keeping up with it. I mean, I'm a parent and trying to keep up with my own daughter. So, the more that we can do with it, the better. So, yeah, bring it to me. It doesn't have to formally come through this group. No, it can, that's okay, but it can just come directly to me as well.
But you're planning for next year now.
Yes, exactly.
On that note, if you're interested, I just received something in my email that I share with some of our guidance counselors from the Anti-Defamation League. They've got a packet of information for educators and for parents on cyberbullying. And they've got some great resources as far as what to look for and some great links. Be happy to share that with you too.
And we just had a presentation by a man from the Bucks County IU to our 9th graders on the topic of cyberbullying, where the kids were actually asked to take out their phones and interact with him and complete a survey of what they're into. So it was very effective, I think.
Got it all covered or anything else? Okay.
All right, fantastic. Again, thank you so much. This is really wonderful. This is my first one of these, of course. And as I said to the elementary group, we talk all the time, or at least I talk all the time. Some people probably get tired of hearing me say it all the time. It takes a village. Abby, you said it a little bit ago. It does take a village. It takes a team. It takes all of us working together and banding together. And with every passing year, that becomes more and more true. So that's moms and dads working at home, that's our administrative staff, that's our faculty who's working in the classroom and in the counseling offices, that's our administrative staff, that's our school board members. They want to make the right decisions and set the school district in the right direction. So does this administrative team. As I said to the elementary group, I will stack this professional staff up against any in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We got the best of the best. So everything is here that we need to have. And so the more that we can band together and be together like this and just have this genuine Q&A back and forth to talk about the kinds of things that matter most. These are the issues that matter most. I think it's really fantastic. So this conversation and all this dialogue need not end here this evening. So hopefully some connections are made here this evening that perhaps weren't made before. Pick up the phone and call, send that email, and let's be in touch. Let's stay in touch and keep the conversations going, because ultimately what it does is it produces the best possible conditions and ultimately outcomes for our kiddos. That's all that matters. There's nothing else that matters more than that. So with that said, on this cool and dreary evening here tonight, thank you all so very much for being here. To our panel, thank you all so much for being here this evening, and we'll see you soon. Yeah. Appreciate it.